Chapter 4655. Yuan sat on the sofa, wearing a casual outfit. She bit her lip and stared at him. This was the first time she had said Mrs. Chin to her since she woke up. She actually felt that it was quite nice. Or perhaps it was because she had been traumatized by Rongyu that she instinctively wanted to find a safe haven. She seemed to have successfully pleased Chin Imo, and he was no longer in a bad mood. Hence, he patted her head like a puppy and did not coax her. He sat beside her and opened his laptop to start a video conference. He did not avoid Yuan at all. Yuan had been sitting there for a while, but the bodyguards came over and gave him a lot of food. She was no longer interested in Chin Mo's affairs. She hugged a bucket of chicken wings and ate. That was Yuan's favorite. She had liked it since she was young, and now that she had returned to her 18-year-old self, she probably liked it even more. Chin Mo was multitasking while he was in the conference. At this moment, apart from a faint bitterness, he was not entirely devoid of joy. At least, Yuan had given up on Rongyu. Even if she still liked him, she would not do anything to him since he had a wife. As Chin Mo thought about it, he was a little distracted. On the other side of the conference, Anna from the Public Relations Department asked, "President Chin?" Chin Mo snapped back to reality and continued the conversation. Just then, Yuan's eyes drifted over and she noticed the woman on the screen. She was really beautiful. She looked like she was of mixed blood, but at the same time, she had the qualities of an Asian woman. She exuded an elite aura. She had instantly outshone many celebrities. It was a waste for such a person to be a woman in the workplace. Yuan felt a little inferior. She looked at Anna and then down at herself. She felt that she was too skinny. Chin Mo happened to turn his head and saw Yuan's actions. He knew her well and immediately understood why she was behaving this way. He smiled and then chuckled. "What are you doing?" Yuan was also startled. After a long while, he finally said, "No, nothing's wrong." She sat back and continued to eat from the bucket. Chin Mo continued the meeting, and Yuan found that he mainly talked about Anna, the public relations manager who was so good-looking that Yuan was jealous of. She bit harder on the chicken wing and chewed. Chin Mo, on the other hand, didn't have anything to say. However, when they finished talking about business and were about to go offline, Anna suddenly said in French, "President Chin, pay more attention to the children's emotions." Chin Mo naturally saw Yuan at the side. Yuan also glared at him, then at Anna. What a hateful woman. Yuan was about to explode. She understood French. She wasn't like the little kid that Anna had described, let alone a kid with emotions. With that, Anna went offline. There was silence in the VIP ward again. But this time, Yuan was not so silent, because Yuan had been eating like a little mouse. Chin Mo stretched out his hand. She was shocked and quickly tried to move away. But he directly took a chicken wing from inside. "I'm hungry too." When Chin Mo ate it, he was actually very elegant and good-looking. Yuan looked at him eagerly. Chin Mo smiled. "Why are you looking at me?" Yuan lowered her eyes and chewed on the chicken wing angrily. After a while, she looked up again. "Chin Mo, all the female employees in your company are so good-looking." Chapter 4656. Memorized. Chin Mo smiled faintly. As the manager of the PR department, of course, she won't look bad. But whether she looks good or not doesn't have much to do with me. She just has to work hard. By the way, Yuan, you're not jealous, are you? Xiaohuan exploded in anger. Of course not. Why would I be jealous? You're nobody to me. For a moment, she forgot that he was her husband again. Chin Mo watched her quietly and suddenly pulled her closer. How is it not related? You're my wife now, and you have the right to be jealous of any woman. Even if you wanted to fire her now, I won't have any objections. Yuan was furious. He was obviously teasing her. So she said angrily, "Fire her then." Chin Mo smiled again. "By making this request, first, you're admitting that you're my wife, right?" In order to get back at him, Yuan agreed shamelessly and nodded. The smile in Chin Mo's eyes deepened. "Second, you admit that you're jealous, right?" "I didn't," Yuan said in a weird voice. But she was still angry with him, so she quickly softened her tone. "Fine, even if you're right, fire her." Chin Mo's eyes were tinged with amusement. "I agree, but the shareholders won't agree either. Anna is King Entertainment's top PR player. Iwan was even more furious. After all, he was just fooling around with her. Was it fun? She ignored him and sat there sulking, gnawing on a chicken wing. Chinamo only thought she was cute. After a long time, he tugged at her hair. Angry again? At this moment, he was trying to coax her. But I have another way. I'll arrange for you to be Anna's superior. You can do whatever you want. Even though he wants memories of when she was 18, she wasn't stupid. How could a naive and sweet girl like her handle a female elite in a workplace like Anna? Yes, naive and naive. This was Juan's precise definition of himself. She stopped talking to him and ate and sulked. Chinamo just looked at her angry face. He continued to work, but the corners of his mouth were slightly raised, looking very happy. Juan bit her lip and sulked. But then, Chinamo reached out and pulled her into his arms again. No, she resisted, but Chinamo was too overbearing. He placed her in his arms and worked just like that. Juan bit her lip and said softly after a long time, "You're not right." He smiled. "What's wrong with me? It's not right to talk business with a beautiful subordinate, and it's also not right to hug my wife." Juan, what do you want me to do? Juan was squeezed so hard that she couldn't say a word. After a long time, she wanted to move away, but her hair was pressed against his chin. He touched her like puppy Mo and said with a smile, "We're cultivating our relationship." Juan didn't want to do it at all. For a long time, he just kept yelling. Mo enjoyed her yelling. At this moment, it didn't matter whether she loved him or not. Anyway, Rongyu had a wife. Suddenly, Mo felt that AI Meng Meng was really a very important person. However, when he thought of AI Meng Meng, Mo's eyes darkened a little. He found out that AI Jia was AI Meng Meng's biological sister. AI Jia also came from the same village, but was adopted when she was young. Chapter 46-57. He sent an email to Rongyu, and Rongyu replied that he understood. Mo stared at those 3 words for a long time. He clenched his fists as his thoughts drifted away. He had tacitly agreed to let Rongyu deal with AI Jia. Because he was thinking too far away, his expression was not very good. It was so gloomy that Juan could not eat anymore. She stared at him. Actually, she had been sneaking glances at him for the past 2 days. She was not familiar with the 40-year-old Mo. He was very masculine. He was not like this in the past. Even though he was good-looking, she would not blush and her heart would race uncontrollably when he got close to her. She was afraid of him in the past. Now, she was even more afraid of him getting close to her because they were husband and wife, right? Juan bit her lip and stared blankly for a long time. On the other hand, Mo felt much better when he looked up and saw her. "You're drooling." Juan immediately reached out and touched it. Then, she realized that she had been tricked. She glared at him. "Mo, you're too despicable." He laughed heartily. After a while, he lowered his head and looked at her. "Aren't you? You're in a daze." Actually, he knew that Juan was very impressed with his looks. Moreover, when they were in a good relationship, she admitted that liking Rongyu was just a substitute. The only person she had ever loved was actually him, Mo. However, men were emotional creatures. Mo was even more so. Maybe it was because he loved her too much, or maybe it was because he had begged her too many times. Hence, he was always worried about personal gains and losses. This was not his character, and he could not tolerate it. However, this person was Juan, so he was willing. At this moment, Juan's face blushed as he stared at her. After a while, she bit her lip and said, "I'm not." Mo smiled and closed his laptop. Then, he said in a low voice, "How about watching a movie?" Juan gasped. She could not believe that he would bring her to watch a movie. "Aren't I hospitalized? I'll be discharged tomorrow." He smiled. "Also, the doctor can't cure your illness anyway. Maybe going out to play will make you feel better." When he said that, she actually thought of Rongyu and what happened before. Her little head drooped down again, looking a little dejected. Mo pulled her hair. "Xiaowan, what do you think?" Juan replied weakly. "Don't call me Xiaowan." Mo smiled again. "Because you are very young now. I'm 33, she whispered, unsure of herself as she said it. Chinamo looked at her, his eyes bright. After a while, he said in a low voice, "You're 18 years old now, Mrs. Chin. Go out and take a look at the script written by Romeo." As he spoke, he reached out his hand and touched her little head again. What happened afterwards was much more wonderful than you can imagine. As he said this, Huan blushed again and looked at him eagerly. Chinamo got up and put on a coat for her. He also took one for himself and took her out. Of course, they were followed by a few bodyguards. There was one in the car and 3 in the car behind. Huan and Chinamo sat side by side in the back seat of the car. She was a little uneasy. "Chinamo, why did you bring bodyguards?" Chinamo was silent for a while before he said in a low voice, "To be safe." Chapter 4658. Chinamo was silent for a while before he said calmly, "Something happened to you previously, so it's best if someone follows you." Huan asked, "Chinamo, aren't you human?" Chinmo's face darkened as he glanced at her. "I can't follow you all the time." He wanted to keep her by his side all the time, but Huan had always been an active child. When she was 20, she went abroad to study for a few years. After they got married, she didn't return home for 6 or 7 years. Now that he thought about it, they were still young when they were really together. He felt a little gentler in his heart, and he couldn't help but reach out to stroke her hair. Huan had been curled up in the corner, and she didn't move at all. She was afraid that he might have something else. Chinamo didn't have anything else. He retracted his hand after touching her hair. Huan was still curled up in the corner, staring at him quietly. After a long time, she seemed to recall something. She bit her lip and asked softly, "Chinamo, why and how did I get hurt?" Chinamo looked at her quietly for a long time before he said softly, "I was pushed to the ground by a crazy movie fan. My head got hurt." He didn't hide it from her, and his voice was very soft. "There's a small blood clot at the back of your head that's pressing on your nerves, so you can't remember for now." Huan was stunned for a moment before she said softly, "Then, will I never be able to remember in the future?" Chinamo reached out and pulled her over, placing her in his arms. Huan wanted to avoid him, but he wouldn't let her. He kept her in his arms and stroked her little head as though he was stroking a puppy. His voice was suddenly hoarse. "Actually, it's okay if you can't remember." Huan looked up at him, her eyes watery. Actually, the 40-year-old Chinamo was much gentler than the 25-year-old Chinamo, but she was even more afraid of him. As for this kind of fear, it was actually different from before. As for what was different, even Huan himself couldn't tell. She stared at him in a daze while he smiled faintly. After a long time, she finally thought of a topic. "What about that person?" Chinamo just looked at her quietly and didn't say anything, but there was some unfathomable look in his eyes. Therefore, Huan knew that after the palpitation, his heart began to beat wildly. After all, this was not something an 18-year-old Huan could understand. She bit her lip and murmured after a long time, "Shouldn't we hand him over to the law?" Chinamo smiled faintly. Then he smiled faintly. "Even if he is sentenced to a few years, when he comes out, he'll be a mad dog." In Chinmo's world, he believed in cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots. Moreover, that person was originally being used by others, so he couldn't tolerate it. Hearing this, Huan was a little stunned and couldn't come back to his senses for a long time. After a long time, she gently broke away from him and shrank back to the original corner. The car was very spacious, so she was actually very far away from Chinmo. Chinmo didn't force her and only smiled. "Do you think I'm scary?" Huan shook her head, but she quickly nodded. She just didn't speak and looked depressed. After a long time, she murmured, "I want to recover my memory, but I'm afraid it will be very bad." Her gaze fell on his face, and there was a somewhat complicated look in her eyes. Chinmo's heart softened. "We're not as bad as you think. In fact, it's beyond your imagination." Chapter 4659. Chinmo's heart softened. "Our relationship is not as bad as you think. In fact, it's beyond your imagination." Although he did not want to compare himself, he still said, "It's better than when you and Rongyu were at their best. After all, we are husband and wife and have a child." I've been through so much more than you and wrong you. Hee-Hwan listened to him in a daze. Her expression was rather adorable. Chin and Mo looked at her dumbfounded expression and was a little annoyed. You don't believe me? Hee-Hwan wanted to say something, but the driver, old Zhao, laughed. You're making things difficult. Chin and Mo. She can't remember now. How would she know if you're lying to her? Chin and Mo was a little confused. He was still confused for a long time. He wasn't sure that he had actually been teased by old Zhao. Old Zhao was not a person who usually made jokes. Today, it was the opposite. Chin and Mo did not want to lose his temper. His gaze fell on Hee-Hwan's face again. Hee-Hwan turned her face away from the window. He was not sure if she was smiling. Regardless of whether it was true or not, he still reached out and pinched her little face. Hee-Hwan squealed and glanced at him. Chin and Mo was much happier. He pinched her little face again. We'll be there soon. Be good and follow me. Hee-Hwan replied. Oh. Then, she realized that something was wrong. She glared at him. Why should I follow you? I'm not a child. The car stopped at the underground parking lot of a plaza. Chin and Mo took the coat and put it on for her. He chuckled. Mrs. Chin, aren't you 18 years old now? If you're not a child, what are you? Old Zhao and the bodyguards laughed. Hee-Hwan, on the other hand, snorted. She was so shameless. Chin and Mo got out of the car and pulled her down. All right, let's go watch a movie. Hee-Hwan replied. Oh. She turned to look at the four animals and followed them. Do they have tickets? She asked softly. Chin and Mo smiled. I guess so. Hee-Hwan couldn't help but ask again. As long as we come out, will they follow us? Chin Mo's gaze fell on her little face, and he smiled. You don't like it? Hee-Hwan was smart enough not to respond. Chin and Mo smiled, knowing that she was a little smart. She wasn't stupid to begin with. She was a very smart child. Therefore, she would not answer such a question. Chin and Mo tugged at her hair and smiled. Hee-Hwan went upstairs and took the movie ticket, but he was dumbfounded. This was clearly the prelude to booking the entire place. She bit her lip. What's the point of looking at ourselves? Chin and Mo said lightly. It's just a movie. Or do you want to be with a group of people? He paused for a moment, then nodded. That's true. Most of the people watching movies are young. You probably want to meet some handsome guy. Hee-Hwan said angrily. I didn't. Chin and Mo smiled. If you don't, then it's fine for us to watch it alone, right? Hee-Hwan was rendered speechless. After a long while, she snorted. Let's watch it alone. Who has a problem? Chin and Mo smiled and got the bodyguards to clear the place. This was King Entertainment's business, so it wasn't a big deal to book the entire place. It was just to boost their sales. Hee-Hwan and Chin and Mo went straight in, followed by the four bodyguards. Even old Zhao could go in with them. Hee-Hwan sat down and looked at the 5 men in front of her. She said to Chin and Mo speechlessly, if we book the entire place, they won't have to come in. Chapter 4660. She regretted it as soon as she finished speaking. As expected, Chin and Mo immediately looked at her with bright eyes. Do you want to be alone with me? Hee-Hwan snorted and then focused on the movie. It was really strange to reserve the theater. She found it hard to get into it. Moreover, she didn't have any expectations. Because Hee-Hwan, who was 18 years old, had never thought about being a director. However, after looking at it for 5 minutes, her expression changed. She didn't remember what happened later, but she had an indescribable feeling when she watched the movie. It touched her heart, which was something that even Chin and Mo couldn't do. He said that they loved each other, didn't they? But why couldn't he be better than a movie? Hee-Hwan thought about it, and then looked at him with a little complaint. Feeling her gaze, Chin and Mo smiled. How was it? Hee-Hwan's gaze fell back to the screen. She stared at it for a long time before she exclaimed, the editing is amazing, and AI Meng Meng acted the best. Hearing her words, Chin and Mo smiled faintly. This was Hee-Hwan, a girl with principles. Even if she didn't like AI Meng Meng, she was still a rival in love in Hee-Hwan's heart. But she couldn't deny her talent and acting skills, so Hee-Hwan wouldn't be stingy with her praise. Although she had a small temper, she was still very broad-minded. That was one of the reasons why Chin and Mo liked her. But it wasn't the main reason. He liked how unreasonable she was when she threw a tantrum. He liked how she was spoiled by him. So, he was also a masochist. Every time he thought about giving up, he would think that there was only one Hee-Hwan in the world. Maybe there were women who were prettier, gentler, or even cuter than her. But so what? They weren't Ihuan. So, their excellence and cuteness meant nothing to Qin Mo. She was the only one he liked, and it had been almost 30 years since then. He was already 40 and probably only had another 30 years left. He didn't want to waste time looking for another woman. Even if it was right in front of him, he might not want it. Ihuan did not know that Qin Mo's mind was in turmoil. She just looked at the screen, focused because this was her future. Actually, it was the past again. After a long time, the movie finally ended. Ihuan was still staring blankly at the screen and muttered, "Was this really directed by me?" Qin Mo looked at her quietly. Ihuan slapped his face with all his might. "I'm not dreaming, right? I'm so outstanding." Qin Mo couldn't take it anymore. He chuckled and said, "I edited it." Ihuan's little mouth opened slightly, and she looked dumbfounded. Is it strange? I work for an entertainment company. I know a little of almost everything, but I'm not very good at it." Ihuan was speechless again. How is this not very proficient? This was simply forcing others to have no food to eat. Ihuan stared at him. Qin Mo smiled, took her hand, and walked out. When they went out, there was a crowd in another hall. The movie had just ended. When Ihuan and Qin Mo came out, they bumped into the crowd opposite them. Although Ihuan was wearing sunglasses, she was still recognized. A few crazy fans shouted her name, and some even wanted to rush over. After all, their idol had been injured, and they were excited to see her. Chapter 46-61. When the fans rushed over, Qin Mo quietly pulled Ihuan behind him. Then, for bodyguards, stopped the crazy fans so that Qin Mo and Ihuan could leave. In the elevator, Ihuan and Qin Mo were standing side by side. She stole a glance at Qin Mo. He didn't look too good. She didn't know what was wrong with him. What was wrong with him? But she still asked worriedly, "Do you think I will disappoint the fans if I just run away like this? Will there be any negative impact?" Qin Mo's face was still a little sullen. Ihuan stared at him for a while and then asked tentatively, "Qin Mo, what's wrong with you?" Qin Mo glanced at her and said slowly, "I thought you didn't want to be a big director. Now you become vain and want fans?" Ihuan smiled and said, "Of course I want fans. I will get a share of the box office, right?" She was not stupid. The money was hers. Qin Mo looked at her and said, "I forgot to tell you. You're not 18 yet, so you don't have a bank card. I will save the box office for you when you grow up." Ihuan was anxious. She said hurriedly, "I am not 18. I am 33. I can get a bank card now." Qin Mo smiled and then looked at her face attentively. He said slowly, "Then you will have to admit that you are Mrs. Qin." Ihuan bit her lip and said after a long while, "I don't want it." Qin Mo didn't care. He rubbed her hair and said, "If you don't want it, you can't continue to be an 18-year-old girl. I don't mind." She was not in good health before. When they lived together, he took care of her most of the time. Now, he was taking care of her too. There was no difference. Not sleeping in separate rooms was Qin Mo's bottom line. At that moment, Ihuan didn't think that far. She didn't know that she was facing the 40-year-old Qin Mo. He was not as innocent as he was in his 20s. When the elevator reached the second floor, Ihuan got into the car and realized that it was Qin Mo who was driving. She asked subconsciously, "Where's Uncle Zhao?" Qin Mo drove a Mulsanne, which he often drove, but Ihuan didn't quite remember it. She had thought that with his identity, he would always be the chauffeur, but he was driving by himself, and he seemed to be very familiar with it. Ihuan sat next to him and listened to his words while looking around at the things in the car. She couldn't remember anything, but she had always grown up with Qin Mo. As long as she couldn't sense the danger he emitted, they were very familiar with each other, just like a family. That was why she dared to touch his things. However, the things in the car were all very feminine. It was obvious that a woman often sat beside it. From perfume to toilet paper, there was even a small blanket with a Finny Piggy design on it. Even though she was touched, Ihuan pretended not to know and asked, "Do women often sit in your car?" Qin Mo tilted his head and looked at her before chuckling softly. "Why do you ask?" Ihuan bit her lip. "These are all women's things. How could they be yours?" Qin Mo didn't reply at first and continued driving. That moment of silence made Juan feel a little uneasy. Could Qin Mo have really cheated on her? She looked at Qin Mo blankly. Just as she was about to ask something, he said, "It's not what you're thinking." Juan froze for a moment. He could read her mind. Chapter 46-62. Qin Mo continued driving and said faintly, "These are all your things." Juan was stunned again. "Huh? What else can I do?" Qin Mo held the steering wheel with one hand and stopped at the red light in front of him. His other hand gently rubbed his good-looking chin, looking particularly masculine. Juan fiddled with the things again and looked up at him. Really? He was still looking at her. 33 years old and still likes these things. Do you think all women are like this? Juan replied, "Oh." After a while, she looked at him again. Then, she was shocked by the brightness in his eyes. Even Juan, who was like an idiot now, thought that Qin Mo wanted to do something bad. She did not say anything. She lowered her eyes and fiddled with the things with her slim fingers. Then, she looked up at him again. That little gaze of hers was really a little pitiful. Qin Mo couldn't help but laugh, and he laughed very happily. Juan could not help but shout, "What are you laughing at?" Qin Mo started the car and looked ahead. After a while, he snorted happily. "There are a lot of things that you don't know." Juan's face suddenly became a little hot. She did not dare to say anything and turned her face away from the window. She could not help but complain in her heart. The 40-year-old Qin Mo was too difficult to get along with. Just like that, the two of them did not say anything, and the car drove all the way to his apartment. It was also the place where they lived after their marriage. Juan had not lived in the wedding house for more than a few months. It was a mansion of about 300 square meters. When the car stopped, Juan asked, "Is this the hospital?" Why did she not recognize it? Qin Mo unfastened the seatbelt. "Let's go home." He unfastened the seatbelt for her and patted her little head. Juan felt that her little brain had crashed after being patted. After a long time, she muttered softly, "I will be discharged tomorrow." Qin Mo found it funny and said, "Do you think I will give you a chance to see Ronyu?" "I won't go either." Juan lowered her head. Every strand of her hair was filled with dejection. "I have a wife." "Oh." Qin Mo dragged out his voice. After a while, he chuckled and said, "If you don't have a wife, you won't stand on ceremony, right?" Juan bit her lip. "I didn't say that." Qin Mo smiled again. "Don't forget that you have a husband, 18-year-old girl." Juan was about to explode. She glared at him, her face round and round. Qin Mo chuckled and got out of the car. Actually, he thought that the current situation was not bad. Juan was quite interesting. Suddenly, he thought that perhaps this was heaven's compensation to him, making up for all the time that belonged to him. She would make it up to him for all the time he had lost her. Qin Mo's eyes suddenly felt a little hot. He stood in front of Juan's car door and was ready to pull it open. However, the throbbing in his heart came so suddenly that he was not prepared at all. He could only suppress it and try his best to suppress it. Only when he calmed down did he open the car door. He bent slightly and said gently, "We're home." No matter how stupid Juan was, she still knew this. She sat in the car and felt that her legs were a little weak. She could not even take a step forward. She bit her lower lip and felt that it was too embarrassing. She did not want him to know. Chapter 46-63. She bit her lower lip, feeling embarrassed. She didn't want him to know either. However, the 40-year-old Qin Mo had a skill that allowed him to accurately understand her needs. He was already bent over, so he easily lifted her up. "Princess Carrie." Juan couldn't help but let out a yelp. Afraid that she would fall, she immediately hooked her arms around Qin Mo's neck. Qin Mo lowered his head and looked at her. "Put me down," she said softly, almost not daring to look at him. Qin Mo's voice was also very soft and abnormally hoarse. "Didn't I carry you like this when you were young?" Juan said pitifully, "I've grown up." Qin Mo was still looking at her quietly as they walked. When they reached the elevator, he didn't let her down. He only said softly, "Now that you've become small again, I'm old." "Juan, do you think that I'm old?" Juan shook her head. "No, you're not old." Then, he lowered his head and kissed her. His voice was hoarse and husky. I'd better treat you like a child. You're indeed young and insensible now, so I won't fuss too much. Fortunately, it's quite interesting. Chinamo laughed. His smile was rather joyful. Then, he lowered his head and kissed her. Ihuan was a little shocked. Even if she only remembered that she was 18, she couldn't be a child. When she retorted like that, Chinamo laughed softly. I'm 40, Ihuan. Compared to me, you're not a child. Ihuan was shocked again and decided to ignore him. She couldn't win against him in an argument. The elevator door opened. There was only one apartment on the top floor. He swiped the card to open the door. The moment she entered, Ihuan was stunned. She was sure that if this was the place they were going to live in after marriage, it wouldn't be decorated like this. How should she put it? This was a place where a young girl lived. Many of the soft clothes were light pink, and some were light yellow. She didn't remember having such a young girl's heart, but now that she saw it, she actually felt that it was not bad. Chinamo put her down, but did not let her escape. Instead, he gently held her in his arms. His tall body leaned slightly, and his chin rested on her shoulder. He whispered, "Do you like it?" Ihuan was a little nervous. Feeling that the atmosphere was a little strange, she turned her head away uncomfortably. There was a hint of a smile in Chinmo's voice. It's best not to move. She let out another, "Ah," and did not dare to move again. Only his eyes dared to look around. Chinmo's voice was still very low. "If you want to stop at 18, I'll accompany you." Ihuan let out another, "Ah," before she muttered. "Then you," Chinmo smiled. "You're just asking for a yard after being given an inch." Her face flushed for a moment before she bit her lip. "How did you know?" He tilted his head and looked at her attentively. After a while, he chuckled. A 40-year-old man knows women very well. If you were a child, it would be easier to understand. Ihuan was fuming again. In reality, she couldn't win against him. At that moment, she wanted to go home, because living with a 40-year-old man was really too scary. However, she did not dare to bring it up, nor did she dare to make a fuss about leaving. If she dared to, she was sure that he would have other requests. Ihuan did not dare to provoke him. Chinamo finally let go of her and patted her. "Look around by yourself. I'll go make dinner. Also, this place has been renovated recently. The materials used are all environmentally friendly, so there won't be any pollution." Chapter 46-64. "Oh," Ihuan replied and looked around. Chinamo looked at her back for a while before he went to the kitchen. Ihuan looked around. It was huge, and the decorations were very girly, except for Chinmo's study, which was maintained in a dignified manner. This was probably Chinmo's last bit of stubbornness. Ihuan didn't go in. She only looked at the door for a while. Then, she opened a children's room. It was a suite, and it was all pink. She even saw a pink bathtub in the bathroom. Oh my God, it was quite cute. Ihuan wanted to go in and soak for a while. Chinamo came in with a glass of juice and saw Ihuan looking at the bathtub eagerly. He smiled. "Our room is pink too, and it's bigger and more comfortable. You can soak in it." Ihuan turned to look at him in disbelief. He was actually willing to use a pink bathtub. Chinamo was dazzled by her starry eyes, and a smile appeared in his eyes. "I know how to take a shower. It won't be like what you're imagining." Ihuan nodded and asked again, "You really don't know how to?" "I don't." Chinmo's face was a little dark. He put the juice in her hand. "Go take a bath and rest for a while." He raised his hand and looked at his watch. "Dinner will be served in about 2 hours. Just eat whatever you like." Ihuan wasn't ignorant at all. She said softly, "You're so busy. Isn't it a waste to spend 2 hours cooking?" Chinamo looked down. "Isn't home life like this? Do you want me to go home and still look like an elite?" He paused for a moment. "If you want, I can cooperate." Ihuan bit her lip and immediately refused. "I don't like it." He smiled and helped her take off her coat. "You don't have to wear it because of the temperature at home. Go take a bath. Don't take too long." He instructed her like an old father. Ihuan looked at him strangely and went to take a bath by herself. In the master bedroom, it wasn't as girlish as outside. There was always a hint of masculinity. Perhaps it was because Chinamo needed to sleep too, so he couldn't stand being so feminine. The main color was white and beige, which was very comfortable. Ihuan lay down on the big white four-poster bed. Lying on her stomach, She closed her eyes and felt very comfortable. It was so comfortable that she wanted to sleep. She really fell asleep. After some time, Chinamo came over and found that she had fallen asleep. He couldn't help smiling and sat down next to her. He looked at her sleeping appearance, a 33-year-old woman who had been his wife for so many years. He reached out a hand and gently stroked her hair, chuckling, "You still say you're not a child." His heart was indescribably soft. He lowered his head and kissed her. After thinking for a while, he decided not to wake her up for dinner. Her health was not good, and she was probably exhausted from playing for half a day. Chinmo accompanied her for a while before going to the study to deal with work. Recently, he could only accompany her at home or in the hospital. She was so young now, and he was really worried about her. He had to bring her along everywhere. Just the thought of it made him feel silly. It was warm in the master bedroom. When Juan woke up, she had a blanket on her body. She rubbed her eyes and sat up immediately. Looking at the blanket on her body, she was a little confused and understood. Chapter 46-65. Juan removed the blanket from her body and got out of bed. It was quiet everywhere in the apartment. She looked around but didn't see Chinmo. It was strange that she was looking for Chinmo in such a strange place. Finally, she found him in the study. She pushed the door open and saw Chinmo sitting behind the huge wooden desk. He was holding a cigarette in one hand and flipping through some documents with the other. His fingers were beautiful, slender, and strong. Juan looked at them eagerly. Then, she thought disappointingly that it had nothing to do with her whether his fingers looked good or not. She stood there and called out to him like a kitten. Chinmo looked up. In that instant, there was a hint of exhaustion in his eyes. It was pure physical exhaustion. Juan was stunned. She had never thought that Chinmo would be tired. In her impression, he was always full of energy. Was it because he was old? She asked in a daze. Chinmo maintained his original posture. He held the cigarette in his hand and stared at her quietly. After a long time, he smiled. "I'm old." If it was the 33-year-old Juan, she would have known that it was dangerous. But the 18-year-old was a little ignorant and dumb. She said, 40 is a little old. I remember that you should be 25. Chinmo got up and walked towards her. His body was tall and straight, slender and powerful. He was very, very masculine. Juan stammered as he thought about it. Chinmo walked straight over. He was no more than 10 centimeters away from her. He lowered his head and murmured, "I'm not old at 40. If you don't believe me, we can try." Juan looked up and stared at him for a few seconds. Then, she covered her face and ran out. As she ran, she shouted, "Chinmo, you're so shameless." Chinmo smiled and covered his eyes with his hands. He sighed softly. If she was 18 years old, so be it. At most, the older Juan would take care of her. At least, he had liked her when she was in her teens. 18 years old was enough. Juan didn't know his perverted thoughts. She ran into the dining room, turned around, and snorted at Chinmo, "I'm hungry. Where's the food?" Chinmo was wearing a black shirt. He didn't look like he was at home at all. However, he still brought out Thai cuisine. It was done very well, and it was fragrant. Juan's eyes lit up, and her voice was soft. "Chinmo, when did you learn that?" Chinmo smiled and sat down. "Didn't I say that there are many things you don't know?" "Oh," Juan replied. She sat down and couldn't wait to taste it. She felt that every one of her taste buds had been conquered and smoothed. It was too delicious. As he ate, he glanced at Chinmo from time to time, thinking how amazing he was. Chinmo didn't say anything and looked indifferent. Juan ate very quickly. She was satisfied after about 10 minutes, but she still tried to stuff a little more into her mouth. Chinmo stopped her. "It's not good to eat too much. If you want to eat, you can cook tomorrow." Juan's eyes were sparkling. After a long time, she said, "Chinmo, do you know how to cook French food? Is Italian food okay?" And she said a bunch of things. President Chin had been eating. After listening, he calmly wiped his lips. "As long as you need it, I can do it." Juan was stunned again. After a long time, she whispered, "Really?" Chapter 46-66. Chinamo smiled and said softly, "Of course." "Oh," Huan replied and got up. Because she was too full, she held her tummy and slowly moved to the sofa in the living room. Then, she did not want to move anymore. Chinamo finished his meal and did not tidy up. Instead, he walked over and patted her. "Go wash the dishes." Huan lay there and said confidently, "I don't know how." Chinamo reached out and pinched her cheeks. After a long time, he said, "You still have to learn. Otherwise, there won't be a feast." Huan said obediently, "Let's go out. It'll be a feast too." Chinmo's reply was to reach out and flick her cheeks. "You've learned to be bad." As he said that, he got up helplessly. Huan asked carefully, "Are you going to shower?" After she asked, she realized that she had asked the wrong word. Hence, she hurriedly said, "I said it wrong. I meant, are you going to wash the dishes?" He smiled again. "What else?" Huan looked at him helplessly. After a long time, she asked softly, "Are you going to abandon me because I'm not going to wash the dishes?" If he did not want her and take her in, she felt that she had nowhere else to go. At that moment, she almost forgot that she had parents and thought that she was born from a rock. After Huan asked the question, Chinmo smiled meaningfully. He reached out and patted her head as though he was playing with a puppy. "That's possible." "Oh," Huan replied and got up. She was so full and tired. She raised her head to look at Chinmo, feeling extremely aggrieved. "I'll just go wash up." Chinmo held her back and said in a low voice, "Let me do it." Huan was very stubborn this time. She insisted on doing it herself. Even Chinmo could not hold her back. He thought to himself, "This fool. Does she really think that I'll abandon her if she doesn't do some housework? Did she have no faith in him before she turned 18? Chinmo smiled and followed her, watching her clear the table. This was not a problem for Huan. She even knew to wipe the table clean. Chinmo felt like his child had grown up. He leaned on the side with a cup of coffee in his hand and looked at Huan quietly. He knew that Huan wouldn't, so he was very lenient with her and only frowned when she smashed a few plates. He didn't tell her that these plates were her favorite. Each of them was a work of art that she brought back from Milan, and each of them cost tens of thousands. Of course, Chinmo didn't mind. However, Huan's finger was pricked when she fell on the fifth one. She immediately frowned as she watched the blood ooze out and mix with the water in the pool. Chinmo's expression changed. He immediately put the coffee in his hand on the counter and walked over to hold her hand. He looked down at her and said, "You were too careless." "Oh," Huan replied. She looked really pitiful, so he didn't want to reprimand her. Chinmo brought her back to the living room and asked her to sit on the sofa while he went to get the first aid kit. When he came back, he sat next to her. The blood had stopped flowing, but the delicate girl kept frowning as if she had been seriously injured. She had always been afraid of pain, and Chinmo knew that. Now he only felt very funny seeing her like this. Chapter 46-67. It wasn't that he didn't feel sorry for her, but she was just too cute. A small wound, as if she was about to leave this world. Just like in the past, when it was just her period and she bled a little, it was as if she had a terminal illness. Huan was a little girl who was afraid of pain. Sometimes she was so cute that she could explode, and sometimes she was so hateful that it made him vomit blood. But now she was still cute. He decided to be a little more lenient with her. Reaching out, he caressed her forehead gently to comfort her. Then he opened the first aid kit. It was just a small wound, but Chinmo treated it like a big one. He disinfected it first. It hurt a little, and the delicate girl kept sucking in air. Chinmo couldn't continue. He was speechless and stopped. "Huan, are you deliberately making my heart ache?" Huan's eyes were wide open as she stared at him. "Did I? Why should I make your heart ache? And I didn't do anything." Chinmo was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood again. He glared at her. Huan's voice was as soft as a little lamb. "Chinmo, are you angry?" He glanced at her. Her voice rang out crisply again. "If you're angry, will you take revenge on me? Will you hurt me on purpose?" "Shut up." His tone was very unpleasant. Then, he bandaged her wound. Yes, as she wished, he hurt her in revenge. Amidst Huan's cries, Chinmo was satisfied, but his girl was crying. She leaned against the sofa angrily, her body twitching. Chin Mo wanted to talk to her, but she turned her little face to the side and watched the television out of boredom. At this moment, a saying came to Chin Mo's mind: fearless when you're favored. But at times like this, he was still very willing to pamper her. After tidying up, he said casually, "I think it would be good to eat a shredded apple after dinner." Huan's ears immediately perked up like a little rabbit. Chinamo didn't seem to notice her reaction and seemed to be talking to himself, "But no one will eat it after I make it. I'd better go to the study to work." Someone's eating, Huan shouted. Chinamo smiled, looked at her, and then reached out his hand. Huan stared at him for a long time. Finally, she tilted her little face towards him and let him pinch it like a pet. Only then was he satisfied and got up to do it. Huan was waiting patiently, but after a while, she decided to go to the kitchen to have a look. Chinamo was making it, and he looked very skilled. Huan was in a daze again. He looked so handsome when he was making desserts. Is there anything he can't do? She thought. Chinamo could feel that she was at the door and was peeking at him. He didn't say anything and just let her see. Huan didn't stand on ceremony. When he was done, she wasn't peeking anymore. She leaned over like a little puppy. The look was really quite funny. "Do you want to try it?" After Chinamo said that, he thought of Shunting and Huan. He sighed in his heart. He was an enlarged Shunting. Huan was no different from Huan now. The only difference was that he only knew how to eat and sleep. But the girl who was looked down on didn't think about anything else. She just wanted to eat. She finished a small bowl in a short while. She even looked at Chinamo when she was done. Chapter 46-68. Chinamo looked at her and snorted. "I don't have enough for today." Huan looked at him pitifully. "I'm not full yet." Chinamo glanced at her. Then his gaze moved downwards, finally landing on a certain little melon-like tummy. Huan was stunned. After a while, she said, "I'm bleeding, so I need to nourish myself." "Is that so?" He dragged out his words and smiled. "I'll cook some red beans for you. They're more nourishing." Huan glared at him. Her eyes were watery. After a while, she said slowly, "Chinamo, you're poisonous." Chinamo laughed and pinched her face. "A small bowl is enough. You should eat less sweets, or else." He smiled even more meaningfully. "You'll get fat." Huan looked down at her skinny body. She didn't believe him. However, she wouldn't beg him. That would be embarrassing. She ran away. She didn't want to eat red beans. Chinamo smiled and really cooked a cup of red beans. It wasn't because she had lost some blood, but because her body wasn't feeling well and she needed nourishment. Other than the red beans, he added a few other nourishing things and brought them to the living room. She was watching TV with relish. Chinamo reached out and hooked Huan to his side. He brought the cup to her lips. "Drink a little." Huan bit her lip and didn't say anything for a long time. She just stared at the cup. She stared at it. Chinamo smiled. "Drink a little." Huan frowned. She rejected instinctively. "I don't want to drink." Chinamo stared at her and lowered his voice. "Be good." "I don't want to be good." Huan bit her lip and continued to watch TV, ignoring him. Chinamo was amused. He hooked one arm around her and held her in his arms. With the other hand, he brought the glass to her lips and locked his gaze on hers. Huan bit her lips and did not say anything for a long time. Chinamo was still quiet. After a long time, he said in a hoarse voice, "If you don't drink it, I'll kiss you." Huan's eyes were wide open, and she didn't even dare to breathe. After a while, her face turned red. Chinamo laughed and reached out to stroke her hair. "Breathe, idiot." Huan took a few deep breaths, and her eyes were watery. Her voice sounded even more pitiful. "Chinamo, I don't want to drink it. Can you drink it for me?" His eyes were still fixed on her, and his meaning was clear. Still, he tapped her lips. Thus, the little girl who hated red beans the most immediately lowered her head and took 2 small sips. She felt so bitter, but compared to Chinmo's kiss, she would rather drink this. It was terrifying to kiss the 40-year-old Chinmo. She didn't even dare to think about it. It was a sin to think about it. She drank it aggrievedly. She didn't look up at Chinmo until the glass was empty. Her eyes were clearly saying, "I don't like you anymore." Chinmo's eyes were tinged with a smile. He reached out to hold her chin and chuckled, "Good girl." Hwan bit her lips. "You're so annoying." Chinamo was still smiling lightly, but he suddenly leaned forward and kissed her lightly on the lips. Hwan was stunned. Her mind went blank. He said that he would kiss her if she didn't drink it. But she drank it. Why did he kiss her? Chinamo seemed to know what she was thinking. He chuckled. "We're husband and wife. It's normal for us to kiss." Husband and wife? Normal. Chapter 46-69. Chinamo seemed to know what she was thinking. He chuckled. "We are husband and wife. It's normal for us to kiss." Husband and wife? Normal? Hwan wondered if other things were normal in his heart. She stared at him for a long time. Chinamo patted her head happily. "Go take a bath and sleep later." He looked at his watch and reminded her. "It's 9 o'clock. Hwan looked at him pitifully. "Don't adults sleep late?" Chinmo's eyes were tinged with a touch of amusement. "You want to sleep late?" Hwan stared into his eyes as if she was possessed. After about half a minute, she immediately jumped down and ran towards the direction of the bedroom. Chinmo still maintained his original posture. He looked at her back and laughed. "You're not stupid after all." Actually, she was not stupid. She was very smart. How could Chinmo not know that she only accepted him now because she depended on him? He was someone she had known since she was young, and he was willing to take care of her. Ronyu was married, and Hwan was just looking for comfort. How could it be so easy to fall in love with someone else? If it was so easy, it wouldn't be called love. Actually, he could understand, and he could understand, but his heart still hurt a little. He was also made of flesh and blood. He would also feel pain. Chinamo sat quietly for a while and went to the study to smoke. Actually, work was endless. He just sat in the study for a while so that he wouldn't scare her. After all, in Hwan's heart, they were not really husband and wife. She would be afraid to sleep together. Chinamo sat in the study and smoked quietly. In the master bedroom, Hwan lay on the bed for a while. Her little head was pressed against the white bedsheet, and her face was rubbing against the high-quality fabric. She felt very comfortable. After lying there for a while, she got up and went to the changing room to get bathrobe. Her face was a little hot. She didn't know why she was blushing, and her heart was warm. She quickly went to take a bath and felt very comfortable all over. Hwan closed her eyes and held onto the bathtub. Slowly, she fell asleep. When Chinmo returned to the bedroom, he saw such a scene. Hwan lay quietly in the bathtub. Her breathing was shallow, and her face was tilted to the side. He was very quiet and obedient. He couldn't help but laugh. He reached out to touch his forehead and went over to pick her up. He also realized that the water in the bathtub was actually cold. He looked at her silently and sighed. Without saying anything, he carried her back to the bedroom. He carefully dried her body and helped her put on the bathrobe. He felt that her body was a little cold. Chinmo was worried, so he went to find 2 hot water packs and filled them with 60 degrees Celsius water. He placed them on both sides of her body to warm her up, while he made himself a simple shower. Then, he made a cup of coffee and went to work in the bedroom. That night, he did not dare to sleep, for fear that she would have a fever. But the more one was afraid, the more likely it would happen. Hwan's fever started in the latter half of the night. Her forehead was very hot. Chinmo measured it for her. It was 39 degrees Celsius. Hwan probably wasn't feeling well either. She woke up and opened her eyes. She said in a daze, "Brother?" Chinmo was stunned for a while before he came back to his senses. She was treating him as a 25-year-old now. His heart throbbed, and there was an indescribable softness in it. "You're a little hot. I'll go get some water and medicine." Chapter 46-70. Memorized. Chinmo was just about to leave when the little girl hugged his waist from behind. "Don't go." Chinmo lowered his eyes and looked at the slender fingers on his waist. He said in a low voice, "I'm just going to get something." Leaning against his back, Hwan was in a daze. She felt very hot and very cold at the same time. It was extremely uncomfortable. She lowered her eyes and said in a weak voice, "Brother." He grunted in acknowledgement and tilted his head to look at her. "You're already so big, yet you're still so clingy." Actually, he couldn't be too harsh on her. She only remembered what happened before she turned 18. At that time, she was just a little girl and didn't know anything. He was the one who taught her how to use sanitary pads. As Chinamo said this, Hee-hwan hugged him a little tighter. I feel terrible. I want to accompany her. Chinamo smiled and picked her up. He carried her to the living room like he was carrying a child to get some water and medicine. Fortunately, it was warm everywhere in the house. Chinamo easily carried her with one hand. She was really too light and too skinny. She was 160 centimeters tall and probably not even 90 centimeters tall. Carrying her was like carrying a small feather. Chinamo looked down at Hee-hwan and murmured, "You really should eat more." She was so small now that he wanted to feed her, but he didn't want to spoil her. After much difficulty, he took the medicine and poured her a glass of water. It was quite troublesome for him to bring her back to the master bedroom and put her down. Chinamo sat on the edge of the bed and placed his hand on her forehead. He felt it quietly and felt that she seemed to be a little hotter. Hee-hwan looked at him helplessly. "Will I die?" His answer was to pinch her cheeks hard and whisper, "Nonsense." She still looked pitiful. "Brother, I feel terrible." His heart instantly softened. There was still some pain, and his voice was hoarse. "I know. I'll be fine after a while." He placed the medicine on his palm and fed it to her. Hee-hwan was especially obedient at this moment. She usually didn't like to take medicine, but she obediently ate it now. Chinamo looked at her and said softly, "Drink some water." He reached out to support her, let her lean on his shoulder, and carefully fed her the water. Hee-hwan couldn't drink anymore after drinking half cup. She shook her head to indicate that she wanted to take a nap. She slept, but Chinamo couldn't. He had to watch over her. Hee-hwan lay down, but she didn't fall asleep immediately. Instead, she opened her eyes and looked at Chinamo quietly. Chinmo's heart was very soft. He reached out his palm and touched her forehead. "Why aren't you sleeping?" Hee-hwan's face was still abnormally red. She gently moved her head over and rested it on his arm. Then she whispered, "I'm scared." As she spoke, her little face was especially fragile. Chinmo's heart ached, and his voice became even gentler. "What are you afraid of?" "I'm here, aren't I?" Hee-hwan stared at him and then said in a hoarse voice, "I'm afraid that when I wake up, I won't know what I'll look like." "Chinamo, what if I become a 3-year-old or a 10-year-old?" Chinmo's heart became even gentler. He reached out and brushed her hair with his fingers. Then he said very softly, "Then I'll help you change your diaper." Hee-hwan slightly widened her eyes. "I don't want you to change my diaper." So President Chin smiled and said, "Little Mrs. Chin, unfortunately, I changed it for you." Hee-hwan glared at him for a while, then pulled the blanket over her face and said softly, "I'm going to sleep." Chapter 4671. Chinamo chuckled and tugged at her blanket. "Don't suffocate yourself." Hee-hwan stared at him and did not speak for a long time. Chinamo smiled. "All right, there's nothing embarrassing about it. I'm 7 years older than you, isn't it? It's only right for me to take care of a baby younger than me." He was clearly a man in his 40s. Even though he was clearly speaking in a normal manner, Hee-hwan felt as though she was being carefully cared for. She raised her little face and looked at Chinamo. After a while, she said softly, "If I really become a few years older, will you still want me? What do you think?" Chinamo smiled and reached out to caress her forehead. "You've been thinking about random things all day. Take a break when you have time." Hee-hwan nodded and closed her eyes obediently. Chinamo looked at her and stayed by her side. After half an hour, he took her temperature. It had dropped a little, and he was finally relieved. After staying by her side for a while, he felt a little sleepy and decided to lean against the headboard so that it would be more convenient for him to look after her. The night was long and short. Chinamo took her temperature a few times. After that, he used physical methods to lower her fever. Fortunately, her temperature finally dropped when the sun rose. When the first ray of sunlight shone in, Hee-hwan opened her eyes and realized that she was sleeping in Chinmo's arms. He was leaning against the headboard with his clothes on, and she was leaning sideways in his arms. The smell of his body was very pleasant, and it felt very stable. Hee-hwan couldn't help but smell for a while longer. Then, she raised her head and wanted to talk to him. However, at that moment, Chin-mo happened to be looking down at her, and she bumped into his chin. Chin-mo grunted and reached out to hold her hair. He said helplessly, "It's early in the morning." Hee-hwan grunted, "I want to get up. Sleep with me for a while more." He hugged her as though she was a doll. He reached out and pressed her little head. "I stayed by your side all night last night. I'm exhausted." There was even a hint of complaint in his tone. In his arms, Hee-hwan whispered to him, "You didn't sleep the whole night?" At this time, all men would pretend to be pitiful. The more pitiful they pretended to be, the more sympathy they would get from women. Chin-mo also knew this kind of trick. He rubbed his brows, and his voice sounded tired. "What do you think?" After saying that, he lowered his head and looked at her quietly. When Hee-hwan saw that his eyes were bloodshot, it was obvious that he was suffering. So she said softly, "Actually, you can sleep for a while." "How can I sleep?" He laughed and hugged her again. "All right, sleep with me for a while. Wake up at 10. Now, that Hee-hwan was not at home and he was working at home for the time being, he could still sleep in. As for the reason why he woke up at 10 a.m., it was because Hee-hwan had to sleep too. He had a meeting at 11 a.m. Since he was so insistent, Hee-hwan could only accompany him. She thought she wouldn't be able to fall asleep, so she fell into a deep sleep after being hugged by him and smelling his soothing scent. She slept soundly. Chin-mo didn't fall asleep immediately. Instead, he looked at her silently for a while before closing his eyes. At about 9:50 a.m., he woke up automatically. On the contrary, the little fellow who had been clamoring to get up was sleeping like a piglet. Chin-mo looked at her silently for a while and smiled. When he sat up, he suddenly felt dizzy. Chapter 4672. At about 9:50 a.m., he woke up automatically. On the other hand, the little girl who had been clamoring to get up was sleeping like a pig. Chin-mo rubbed his eyebrows and felt a little uncomfortable in his throat. He knew that she must have caught a cold and had a fever. He took the temperature and found that it was 39.5 degrees. He hadn't felt it before. Chin-mo shook his head and smiled helplessly. He got up to find some medicine and took 2 pills. Then, he went to make breakfast for Hee-hwan. She had just been sick, so the breakfast he made was light and delicious. However, he felt even more uncomfortable after making it. It didn't matter to him, but he was afraid that he couldn't take care of her. So, Chin-mo called Anilon to take care of her for 2 days. After the call, he was about to wake Hee-hwan up when he saw the little girl standing at the door of the master bedroom. She looked dissatisfied. "Chin-mo, you're sick." Her tone was accusatory. Chin-mo found it funny. He put down the phone in his hand and stroked it with his slender fingers. Then he smiled and said, "Yes, I'm sick, so I asked Anilon to take care of you for a few days." Hee-hwan was still staring at him. After a while, she said, "I've recovered. Now it's you, Chin-mo, who's sick." He had a look on his face. Hee-hwan looked a little proud. "I can take care of you too." "Oh," Chin-mo said. He found it funny. "What can you do?" "I can learn," she said matter-of-factly. Chin-mo just smiled. Hee-hwan bit her lip and walked over. She took his phone and put it in his hand. "Are you making a call?" "Huh?" she snorted. "What phone call?" "Tell Anilon not to come." There were stars in Hee-hwan's eyes. "You had me to take care of you. Don't say take care of me. Say it again." His voice was a little hoarse. Hee-hwan was stunned. "You have me." After saying that, she realized that she meant something different. She glared at him. "You're taking advantage of me." Chin-mo smiled. "We are husband and wife. Isn't that normal?" Hee-hwan bit her lip and tapped on her phone. "Go ahead." Chin-mo stared at her silently. "I really hit him. You have to take responsibility." Although she knew that he was taking advantage of her again, Hee-hwan acquiesced and nodded with a red face. Chin-mo sighed in his heart. He knew that she was not reliable, but he was still willing to give her a chance, which was also a chance for himself. It was always inconvenient to have one more person in the house. At worst, he could ask someone to send food over. Hee-hwan should be able to do other things. As he thought about it, he made another call. Anilon didn't say anything, but Chin-mo's parents knew about Chin-mo's illness and Hee-hwan's previous injury. Now that Chin-shin dared to say it, they had to come and see him no matter what. Chin Mo didn't know. After hanging up the phone, he looked at Ihuan. You eat breakfast? I'm going to have a video conference. Ihuan stopped him. Let's eat together. He looked at her with amusement. It's an important conference. It's not as important as your health, Ihuan muttered in a low voice. Perhaps thinking that it was too emotional, she added, If you can't do it, what about me? Who's going to take care of me? Chapter 4673. Memorize. Chin Mo laughed and pinched her. You're such an exquisite egoist. Ihuan snorted. You don't have to use adjectives. She thought for a moment and looked at him. Are you going for breakfast or a meeting? President Qin had a strong will to live. Breakfast. Xiaohuan nodded in satisfaction. That's more like it. She led the way to the dining room. Chin Mo followed and tugged at her hair. Act like a little adult. Ihuan glanced at him and said gloomily, I'm 33 years old. Chin Mo smiled and said meaningfully, Aren't you 18? Ihuan sat down. It's useless even if I think about it. Look at my face. It doesn't look like I'm 18 at all. I even saw fine lines in the mirror today. Chin Mo also sat down. He laughed when he heard her say that. That's nothing. As he spoke, he really looked at her face. In fact, Ihuan looked really young. She looked like she was about 22 or 23 years old. She didn't look like she was 33 years old at all. Of course, women were always particularly concerned about their own appearance, and their requirements were also higher, especially for an exquisite egoist like Xiaohuan. If she wasn't beautiful, Chin Mo probably wouldn't want her. He could have many young ladies like this. The more Xiaohuan thought about it, the more she felt a sense of crisis. She felt that she had to take care of Chin Mo when he was sick. She became even more attentive. She spread the jam on the bread and brought out the milk. Chin Mo held the milk and smiled. I just took my medicine. I can't drink milk. Ihuan looked at him and quickly poured him a glass of water. Is this okay? Chin Mo was still smiling. He drank half a glass and started breakfast. It was already 11 o'clock. The executives of King Entertainment, even those overseas, had stayed up all night waiting for Chin Mo. At this time, Chin Mo and his little wife were having breakfast together. Well, it wasn't much, just half an hour. However, the higher-ups on the other side were all sweating profusely. They didn't know who President Qin was angry with. Maybe it was themselves. How terrifying. Chin Mo ate something and felt better. He was about to go to the meeting when Ihuan stopped him again. Let me take your temperature again. President Qin could only continue to sit there and watch Ihuan run around to get the thermometer and stuff it under his armpit. She didn't hold back at all. Chin Mo said helplessly, Ihuan, why do I feel like you're running a house? Ihuan looked at him with her big, watery eyes. Don't talk. Chin Mo was even more amused. What will happen if I tell you? You won't be able to speak properly. She spoke very softly, as if she was afraid of disturbing the thermometer. Suddenly, Chin Mo felt sour and bitter. He called her a little idiot. Then, he ignored the thermometer and pulled Ihuan into his arms. Ihuan was a little stunned. Her little face was about to change shape. She asked very softly, Chin Mo, what's wrong? His voice was indescribable. He said in a low and deep voice, How can there be a little idiot like you? Ihuan replied with a no. Then, her little face became even more distorted. She had difficulty breathing, and her little face was a little red. She couldn't take it anymore. She raised her little fist and hit his shoulder. Chin Mo, let go of me. Chapter 4674. He looked down and laughed. Without saying anything, he put her down. He took out the thermometer and looked at it. Luckily, it was 39 degrees, a little lower. He put it aside. It's much better. Let's go to the meeting. But it's 39 degrees. Ihuan didn't agree. Chin Mo pinched her little nose. Mrs. Qin, I have to support my family. Then, he took her into the study. Sit here. If you feel something is wrong, you can stop it. Ihuan could accept this. Then, she sat on the sofa behind him and played games on her phone. Chin Mo turned on the video conference. He didn't mind that there were people in his study. Therefore, all the executives were absent-minded during the meeting. President Qin was having a meeting with his wife. Moreover, Mrs. Chin seemed to be very engrossed in her game. They wanted to play games too. They wanted to throw away their computers, but they had no choice. When they saw President Chin's handsome face, they felt that they had to work harder. When Chin Mo was in the middle of the meeting, the doorbell rang. Iwan was playing games, so she didn't hear it. Instead, Chin Mo heard it. He tilted his head. Huan, go and open the door. The executives on the other side of the video conference were shocked. Huan, all of them instantly melted. Iwan put down her phone calmly and ran to open the door. When the door opened, she was stunned for a moment. Then, she greeted Mrs. Chin and Mr. Chin affectionately. At the door, Chin Amlin and Yi Liangxiu were naturally worried about their son and daughter-in-law. When they heard the two greetings, they had mixed feelings. Although they had heard about He Huan from Chin Shun, they still felt a little emotional when they saw her in person. Especially Yi Liangxiu. Ever since the incident with Su Ilio, no matter how hard she tried to mend her relationship with He Huan, it was no longer what it used to be. Now that He Huan called her mother Su, her eyes were filled with tears. Perhaps the heavens took pity on him and allowed him to restart everything. Yi Liangxiu nodded, took He Huan's hand, and said to Chin Amlin, "Go and see your workaholic son. I'll chat with Huan for a while." In his ecstasy, he didn't even want to smash it anymore. Chin Amlin rubbed his nose. He also felt a little helpless. His wife was also very emotional. He walked to the study, and Yi Liangxiu and He Huan went to the sofa together. He Huan only remembered what happened before she turned 18, so she was quite affectionate and lively. Yi Liangxiu also had daughters, but now all of them had grown up. Qin Mu was a little bored and wasn't by her side. Qin Shun was even more manly than other men. How could he find a cute girl like He Huan? Yi Liangxiu really doted on He Huan since she was young. Not only did she love He Huan, but it was also because of Su Cheng. When women got older, they would always feel a little estranged because of their children's affairs. When they were young, Su Cheng and Yi Liangxiu were very grateful. So now, all of this was reflected in He Huan. He Huan looked very much like the young Su Cheng. She was small and had a personality. Yi Liangxiu was willing to give everything she had to He Huan. Except for Yi Huan, she hadn't had anyone to dote on for a long time. So, after chatting for a while, she decided to take He Huan out for a walk. He Huan said very slowly, "You have to ask Qin Mo." Yi Liangxiu couldn't help but laugh. "You can't even make this decision?" Then, she realized that He Huan's mental age was 18. She must have been controlled by Qin Mo. Chapter 4675. 1 second to remember. On one hand, Yi Liangxiu hated He Huan for not striving for success, but on the other hand, she felt that He Huan was even more adorable. She had to buy things for her so that she could be worthy of his love. Women were all impulsive. At the thought of this, Yi Liangxiu immediately went to Qin Mo's study. Because of Qin Amlin's arrival, the meeting had to be interrupted. Fortunately, everything that should be discussed had been discussed. At this time, Qin Mo and Qin Amlin were sitting on the sofa, chatting leisurely. They looked especially relaxed, as if he was not sick, and He Huan did not lose her memory and return at 18 years old. Everything was so good, quiet, and beautiful. Yi Liangxiu suddenly felt that this was a gift from the heavens. It was to return Qin Mo's original love. She stood by the door and smiled. "You guys talk. I will take Yi Huan out for a walk. She has been staying in the hospital for a few days, so she must be bored. Moreover, she is at the age where she likes to go out." Qin Mo's gaze fell on his mother's face with some curiosity. He seemed to understand something and then smiled. "Okay, remember to take 2 people out." Yi Liangxiu grunted in acknowledgement and left. Meanwhile, Qin Mo picked up the tea in his hand and gently sipped it, as if he was thinking about something. Suddenly, a small head popped out from the door and said in a crisp voice, "Qin Mo, I'm going out." He looked at her with amusement. "Didn't you say that you would take care of me?" Yi Huan made a face. "Daddy Qin is here." Qin Mo frowned and wanted to correct her, but after thinking for a while, he relaxed his eyebrows and didn't say anything. He just stood up and took out a black gold card from the drawer and put it in her palm. "Swipe the card yourself." "Oh," He Huan replied. She felt as if she was raised by someone. In fact, most of her expenses were borne by Chin Mo since she was a child, so she didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. But she still had to ask clearly, how much is there? If it wasn't enough, he would lose face. Chin Mo couldn't help but laugh. Just swipe if it's less than 100 million. If it's more than that, call Secretary He. She'll help you settle it. 100 million? He Huan muttered softly. I'm not buying a helicopter. Chin Mo smiled, then casually said, it's my birthday in a month. You can buy me a present, no matter how expensive it is. He Huan blurted out 40. Chin Mo just stared at her and didn't speak for a long time. He Huan grinned. 40 isn't something to be ashamed of. Chin Mo was still gnashing his teeth. He Huan, you could be even more despicable. He Huan stuck out her tongue and didn't say anything else. Chin Mo rubbed her little head. Have a good meal outside. I'll cook something delicious for you when you come back tonight. His words warmed He Huan's heart. She whispered, I'll cook for you when I get back. He immediately laughed out loud. You're so nice. Yeah. She looked up at him, a little dazed. Chin Mo didn't say anything either. After a while, she said in a coy voice, I'm leaving. Once again, Chin Mo was like a little puppy who kept kissing her. As for the two elders present, they were forcefully showered with dog food. But again, perhaps this was God's arrangement. He Huan still went out with Yi Liangxiu happily. She called her Mama Chin and was even closer to her than her own mother, laughing like a pig. The saddest thing was that after going all out in the morning, they really did bump into He Huan's mother during lunch. Su Cheng. Chapter 4676. Su Cheng still did not know that He Huan had lost her memory. She only knew that she was injured. Coincidentally, she was not in Bi City these few days, so she came back and met her. She wanted to go up to her immediately, but just as she was about to go over, she heard He Huan calling her Mama Chin. Su Cheng felt that something was wrong. He Huan and Chin Mo were married again. Even if she called him Mama Chin because of emotional problems, how could they be so affectionate? Su Cheng was only one table away from where they were eating. After listening quietly for a while, she finally realized that something was wrong. He Huan's expression and tone were very strange. She did not look like an adult at all. She was talking about girly things. She was basically a young girl, and Yi Liangxiu doted on her very much. It was a good thing for a daughter to be doted on by her mother-in-law. However, Su Cheng did not think that it was a good thing for her to be doted on like this. Why can an old mother not stand it anymore? She came over and sat down. He Huan was stunned for a moment when she came and did not react for a while. However, Yi Liangxiu immediately understood. Looking at Su Cheng's expression, she probably guessed something, so she did not hide it. Su Cheng, He Huan doesn't remember anything after she was 18. Su Cheng was stunned. Although she felt that it was a little strange, she did not expect it to be like this. After a while, she said in a low voice, What happened? Yi Liangxiu sighed. It seems that a fanatic did it. Chin Mo did not fulfill his responsibility. Don't worry, we'll take good care of Huan Huan. Su Cheng was still stunned. After a long time, she came back to her senses. Then, she murmured, if she was 18, she was not married yet. I should have brought her back to take care of her. Huh? Yi Liangxiu did not expect that Su Cheng would have such a way of thinking. The memory stopped at 18, but Yi Huan and Chin Mo were married. If Su Cheng really took her back, what would happen to Chin Mo? Her son was already 40 years old and was still waiting for his birthday present. If he was taken away, Yi Liangxiu would not be able to explain it. Therefore, Yi Liangxiu was naturally unwilling. But on this matter, Su Cheng was very insistent. Actually, it was very simple. As a mother, when she thought about her 18-year-old daughter's mentality, how much of a disadvantage she would have to suffer alone with a 40-year-old man like Chin Mo, it was enough for her to be very forceful. He Huan was a little confused. In fact, she had spent more time with the Chin family before she turned 18. So, she was closer to Yi Liangxiu. He Huan was actually a little afraid of Su Cheng's persistence. She shrank back a little towards Yi Liangxiu. A small hand gently tugged at Yi Liangxiu's sleeve. How could a veteran like Yi Liangxiu not know what a little girl was thinking? so she patted the back of her hand to comfort her. Then, she looked up and discussed with Su Ching gently. The two children get along very well. These days, Qin and Mo has been taking care of them. They grew up together. What are you worried about? Su Cheng smiled. There was always a hint of sharpness in her smile. She was not a sharp-tongued person. She and Yu Liangqiu had been through trials and tribulations in the past, but Su Cheng could not let go of the things that had happened before. Compared with Qin and Mo, He Huan was too weak. This was a patriarchal society. No matter how famous He Huan was, the He family's fate was still in Qin Mo's hands. Therefore, Su Cheng was very worried. Chapter 4677. Updated quickly, no pop-up windows, and free reading. The two sides were in a deadlock. Finally, Yu Liangqiu called Qin and Mo and made an appointment to talk to him in a clubhouse. Su Cheng wanted to see Qin and Mo at this time. President Qin, on the other hand, had to make the appointment even if he had a fever of 39 degrees Celsius and was busy with work. An hour later, Qin and Mo came to the private room of Elan Clubhouse alone. After all, there was only Su Cheng, and he didn't want to see the whole Qin family. When he opened the door, it was a private room. Yu Liangqiu was greeting He Huan and Su Cheng. It was a bit hard to be the host, but it wasn't Su Cheng's fault. It was Qin Mo's fault. Qin and Mo went in and greeted Su Cheng and his mother respectively. Then, he sat beside He Huan and patted her head without saying anything. Su Cheng was enraged. How was this any different from treating a pet? However, she couldn't lose her temper because there was a little girl in front of her, so she was still obedient. Su Cheng complained in her heart, what a spineless guy. He Huan, on the other hand, looked at Qin and Mo with anxiety in his eyes. To her, Qin and Mo was like an old bird, and she was a little bird. She felt at ease living with him, and she didn't want to change anything. Or perhaps, she instinctively wanted a little sense of security. Qin and Mo poured a cup of tea for Su Cheng respectfully and calmly told her about He Huan's injury and her future recovery. He needed Qin Chen's help, so he said a lot. Su Cheng's mind started to work. Although she was at a disadvantage now, if He Huan couldn't remember in the future, Qin and Mo would be better. After talking for about an hour, Su Cheng gave up and sighed. Let's go with Qin and Mo. All the helplessness he felt was for the sake of his daughter's future, even if there was a chance. Besides, He Huan looked very happy. As a mother, how could she have the heart to ruin her daughter's happiness? Maybe it was a good thing that she forgot. Later, they had dinner together, and time came to pick up Su Cheng. When they got home, they naturally talked about it. He Huan went back with Qin and Mo, while Yu Liangqiu and Qin Anlin went back to Liang Garden. As soon as they returned to the apartment, Qin Mo's body temperature rose to 40 degrees Celsius. His stomach problems flared up again, and he knew that he would have to go to the hospital and perhaps undergo surgery. However, he didn't want to scare her, so he just took his medicine and went to bed early. This time, He Huan obediently leaned against him and didn't cause trouble for him. She was afraid that he would die. In the middle of the night, Qin and Mo woke up. He woke up in pain. His forehead was full of sweat, and his stomach felt like it was on fire. He closed his eyes and calmed down for a while. Then, he got up quietly and didn't dare to wake He Huan up. He went to find the medicine and took it. Then, he went outside and called Qin Shen to ask her to come over. Qin Shen was sleeping. In the middle of the night, she was dug up again. She wanted to curse, but she couldn't help it. After all, Qin and Mo was her second brother. Qin Shen got up soon and drove back to the hospital. She knew Qin Mo's body very well. When she arrived at Qin Mo's apartment, it was already an hour later. In the study, she gave him a painkiller and sneered. I thought you weren't afraid of pain. I didn't expect you to take the initiative to give me a painkiller. Qin and Mo glanced at her. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Chapter 4678. Qin Shen could not help but roll his eyes. I know. He Huan is your darling, all right? She thought that Qin and Mo would not admit it. Qin and Mo was a man who liked to be a man, but did not like to talk about it. He was a rather reserved man. But at this moment, after enduring the pain, he felt much more comfortable. He leaned back on the sofa and said in a low voice, "Isn't she my darling now?" Chin could not take it anymore. "Chin-mo, can't you keep a lower profile?" Chin-mo smiled meaningfully. "I'm your wife. Why should I keep a low profile?" Chin smiled. "Juan is getting smaller. Second brother, you're getting younger too." Chin-mo looked at her and harumphed. Then he closed his eyes. "Give me another shot. You don't have to come tomorrow." Chin was speechless. "How can you do that? Painkillers are not commonly used, and you want 2 shots in a row? Are you trying to damage your nerves?" As she said that, she took out a box of medicine. "Be good and take your medicine. You should be fine once your fever subsides." She sighed. "You should go to the hospital to take care of your illness." Chin-mo closed his eyes and waved. "Take care. I won't see you out." Chin kicked him angrily. "How can you be like this? Burning bridges after crossing the river." Even though she was angry, she still cared about him. She reached out and laid him down. "You should be fine after a good night's sleep. I'm not going back today." Chin-mo felt much better. He closed his eyes. "Go to the guest room." Chin smiled. "I'll sleep with Juan." Her brother opened his eyes immediately and frowned. Chin did it on purpose. "We're both girls. What's the matter?" Chin-mo sized up his sister from head to toe. She had neat short hair and handsome facial features. She wore a black shirt and black trousers. She casually wore a jacket on the outside. She was even more handsome than a man. Chin-mo didn't want to imagine such a sister lying together with his wife. He couldn't accept it, so he got up and said, "I'll go back to my room. You can sleep here. It's still warm." Chin hugged the blanket in disgust. "I've worked so hard to come here, and I'm going to sleep here?" Chin-mo put on a fake smile and asked her in return, "What else would you do? Sleep with Juan like this?" That scene was enough to catch me in the act. A guy who seduced second sister-in-law. Chin was speechless. He lay down and said, "You're too stingy. It's not like I didn't sleep with Juan when I was young." Chin-mo glared at her. "Don't even think about it now." As he spoke, he went out and returned to the master bedroom. Juan was still sleeping, the kind that smelled good. Chin-mo chuckled soundlessly. His chuckle was somewhat helpless. She could still sleep soundly in this situation. She was really a little pig. He lay down and turned his head to look at her. Juan must have felt the heat from him. She leaned over and even called out his name. Instantly, Chin-mo's heart calmed down. There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. He kissed her and said in a hoarse voice, "Good night." Juan knew nothing about it. She was still in her sweet sleep. It was a dream that belonged to her when she was 18. She woke up at dawn and saw Chin-mo in a black shirt. She wrinkled her nose and said, "Chin-mo, why didn't you change into your pajamas?" His little nose sniffed like a puppy, and then he said in a low voice, "You smell like medicine." Chin-mo smiled faintly and wanted to say something. Chin leaned against the door of the master bedroom handsomely. "Good morning, sweetheart." Chapter 46-79. When Juan heard the voice, she looked up from Chin-mo's arms and saw Chin in a black shirt, leaning against the door with a cup of coffee in his hand. Those long legs were enough to make one's nose bleed, and that slightly messy short hair was simply. If not for the fact that she knew that Chin was a woman, Juan felt that she would have fallen for him immediately. However, Juan had her own plans. She did not immediately fall in love with Chin-mo, but she was stunned by Chin, which meant that Chin was more handsome than Chin-mo. Just the thought of it made her look at Chin-mo sadly. Chin-mo had never been nice to Go-Urseo's sister. He got up and walked over, kicking the door shut without any expression on his face. Then he turned around and said to his silly wife, "Chin is a woman. No matter how handsome she is still a woman. She can't give you happiness." Juan sat on the bed. She was so small and she looked quite cute. She blinked her eyes and looked cute. It's good to look at him. After she said that, she saw Chin-mo's expression change. There was something unknown in his eyes. His eyes were clear and bright, as though he was doing something bad. Juan was too young to understand, so she could only stare at him blankly. Her body also moved unnaturally. She wanted to escape, but Chin-mo would not allow her to. He pressed her head down. They were too close to each other, and Huan was very uncomfortable. Her head moved in his hand. Chinamo pressed her head down and asked in a low voice, "I'm not good-looking, huh?" Huan was shocked and stammered, "You're good-looking. Then, why do you want to look at Qinshin? Is he better-looking than me?" His handsome face was getting closer, as though he wanted her to see him more clearly. Huan's eyes widened. She bit her lip, not knowing what to do. Qin Imo narrowed his eyes. "Say something. You look just as good." Xiaohuan had learned her lesson and squeezed out a fake smile. President Qin was not satisfied. He pinched her chin and continued to interrogate her. "Am I prettier or Qin-shun? Or Ad Rongyu?" Actually, the three of them were easier to choose. At least, they wouldn't offend anyone. Huan stared at him for a long time before slowly saying, "Qin-shun is the best looking, followed by you and Rongyu." After she finished speaking, she carefully looked at Chinamo. Chinamo smiled. "You're not stupid." Huan heaved a sigh of relief and said, "I just don't know if he's telling the truth." "Of course it's true." Huan immediately said obsequiously, "It's definitely true. I don't lie." Chimo's expression brightened up a lot. In fact, it was not difficult to understand this kind of mentality. His imaginary enemy had always been Rongyu. At this moment, how could he care about his sister? Huan immediately jumped out of bed and ran to the bathroom after she passed the first test. As she brushed her teeth, she recalled how Qin-shun looked just now with a blushing face. Actually, Qin-shun was the best looking. Even if he was a woman, it was good to look at him. Huan continued to brush her teeth. As she brushed her teeth, she suddenly remembered something. She looked up at the mirror for a few seconds. Then, with the foam still in her mouth, she opened the door and said to Chinamo, "Why is Qin-shun here?" It was a little strange to be wearing a shirt and drinking coffee so early in the morning. Chinamo was putting on his tie. When he heard her voice, he turned around. He came over at night. Huan roughly guessed it. She brushed her teeth fiercely and asked with her mouth full of foam, "Chinamo, did you get sick last night?" Chinamo did not deny it, nor did he say anything. He just looked at her quietly. Huan's reaction was very strange. She brushed her teeth fiercely again and went to the bathroom to rinse her mouth. When she came out again, she fell into Chinmo's arms. It was like two ribs were embedded in his arms. It was a little painful, but the pain was also warm. It turned into a little one that stayed in his arms peacefully. Chinamo lowered his head and looked at her, his voice gentle. "What's wrong?" Huan hugged him and buried her face in his chest. She asked him gloomily, "Why didn't you tell me that you were sick?" Chinamo smiled gently. "You're not a doctor." That sounded right, but it was also wrong. Huan was not a little fool. She bit her lower lip. "But I have to take care of you. Qin-shun is enough." He lowered his head. "Moreover, you're just getting better. You need a rest, don't you?" Huan always felt that there was something wrong with his words. Later, she found out that it was because in his heart, she had always been the one being taken care of. She didn't need to participate in anything he did. He treated her like a child. Later, she slowly became dissatisfied with his childlike attitude. But at this moment, Huan still enjoyed the feeling of being doted on. She didn't think that there was anything wrong with Chinmo's attitude. She nodded slowly and raised her head. "You should be fine now, right?" Chinmo nodded and continued to tie his tie. He said, "I have to go to the office later. You stay at home. I'll get Qin-shun to accompany you. She only goes to work in the afternoon." Huan followed behind him. "Does Qin-shun know how to cook?" Unexpectedly, when the door opened, Qin-shun was leaning against the door. He raised his glass at Huan and winked. "I know how to review." Chinmo rolled his eyes at his sister's humor. Then he said to Huan, "Her cooking is comparable to that of a Michelin chef." Huan's eyes sparkled. Could she change her husband? Qin-shun smiled again and put the coffee cup in Huan's hand. "The coffee I make is also top-notch. Do you want to try it?" She had already made breakfast. Chinmo walked over and said calmly, "She's not in good health." Besides, his eyes fell on his sister's face quietly. After a long time, he said in a hoarse voice, "Don't give her coffee." Qin-shun smiled and didn't say anything else. Huan stared at them and felt that they were a little strange. Qin-shun patted her and sat down. "Have breakfast." I'll accompany you in the morning. Second brother should be back at noon. After saying that, she looked at Chin Mo thoughtfully. Chin Mo laughed. I'm fine. Iwan looked at them. She wanted to ask, but did not dare to. She was living in a world of two adults. To others, she was just a little kid. Suddenly, she felt nostalgic. If she became a director, would she be on equal footing with Chin Mo? Of course, it was just wise idea. Before she lost her memory, Huan was still depressed. Chin Mo was really busy. He left after breakfast. Chin Shin accompanied him for breakfast. She looked up and saw Huan stuffing bread into her mouth as she stared blankly in the direction of the window. Chapter 4680. She looked up and saw Huan stuffing bread into her mouth as she stared blankly in the direction of the window. Chin Shin found it funny. He picked up his cup and took a sip of coffee. Then he asked casually, Huan, do you still like Ronyu? Huan exclaimed and came back to her senses. She stared at Chin Shun for a while and stammered. Why do you ask that? Chin Shin smiled. You liked Ronyu until you were 24 years old. Then you started to like Chin Mo, she suddenly said. Actually, think about it now. Do you like Ronyu or Chin Mo? She added, I think you've always liked Chin Mo. They look alike. When you were 16, you told Chin Mu secretly that you wanted to marry Chin Mo when you grew up. Huan still remembered this embarrassing incident. Her face was burning hot. She almost did not dare to recall that she had said such embarrassing things in the past. Chin Shin smiled even more when he saw that she was embarrassed. She loved to tease young girls. Moreover, it was Huan, whom she had always liked. Chin Shin had a preference for Huan's appearance. It was fun to tease beautiful young girls, especially when the other party was his second sister-in-law. Chin Shun was very good at seducing his second sister-in-law. So, Chin Shun said a lot more about Huan's adulthood scandals. Huan wanted to find a hole to hide in. Chin Shun was finally satisfied. He smiled and let her go. The two of them, one big and one small, lay on the sofa and watched TV after breakfast. Both of them were not serious and just watched TV casually. Later, the guy who seduced the second sister-in-law even pulled Huan into his arms. Disappointingly, Xiaowan did not refuse. There was a surveillance camera installed in the house. After the meeting, CEO Qin came back and saw it. He was furious. When he returned to the apartment, his younger sister and his second sister-in-law were lying on the sofa together. The two of them smelled good together. Chinamo was speechless. He felt like he was caught red-handed. However, even if she was angry, what could she do? Chin Shun was a woman. Chin Shun was chased away by his elder brother. He didn't even give him lunch and kicked him out mercilessly. After cleaning up the door, he looked at the little guy again. He had just woken up from a sound sleep, and he even stretched his body. Chin Mo didn't look too good. You're awake? Huan grunted in acknowledgement, looking like she was in a daze. She rubbed her eyes and asked Chin Mo, where is Chin Shun? Chin Mo didn't say anything and just looked at her quietly. For some reason, Huan immediately understood. She stuttered and explained, it's not what you think. Chin Mo gritted his teeth. Of course, there's nothing wrong with my sister's sexual orientation. But for you, I can't guarantee anything. Huan exploded. Of course, there's nothing wrong with me. Prove it to me. Chin Mo's voice was emotionless, and so was his gaze. Xiaowan was stunned. When she came back to her senses, she asked him slowly, how do I prove it? Chin Mo's voice became softer. Prove that you like men. Prove that there's nothing wrong with you. Now kiss me. Huh? Huan never knew that there was such a trick. Kissing him was just to prove that there was nothing wrong with her. There was nothing wrong with her in the first place. Okay? She didn't want to prove it. Why should she prove it to him? He was the one who was sick. Chapter 4681. Huan stared at him and bit her lip. Why should I kiss you? Can kissing you prove it? Of course it can. Chin Mo said confidently and then moved forward. Huan looked at the magnified, handsome face, and her heart suddenly started beating wildly. She couldn't say a word and just stared at his lips. There was only one word in her mind. Kiss him. She really kissed him. Just one kiss, and then she left. Chin Mo didn't deepen the kiss and let her leave, but his eyes deepened a lot. Huan kissed him, and her heart beat faster. She looked at him in a daze. After a long time, she found her voice. "Can I prove it now?" Mo gently touched his lips with his fingers, and his heart skipped a beat. He smiled and said slowly, "Save it for the future. This is too far away." Ah, Huan was in a trance. Mo just smiled and put his arm around her shoulder. "Have you eaten?" Huan wrinkled her little nose when he mentioned this. "You chased Chen away. I'll cook for you." President Chen gently coaxed his little wife. Huan bit her lower lip. "I've been looking forward to the whole morning when you say that Chen does better than Michelin." She would do whatever Chen wanted. Now he chased him away. President Chen was very distressed. But looking at Huan's pitiful and expectant expression, he sighed and finally called his sister. "Chen, come back for a while." On the other side, Chen didn't actually leave. He was leaning against the door. She knew the 18-year-old Huan too well. She was willful and had to get what she wanted. As for Mo, he would probably grant her every request. Therefore, when the phone rang, she was not surprised at all. She hung up the phone and knocked on the door. Huan was disappointed and looked at Mo as if he was useless. However, when he heard the knock on the door, Huan immediately trotted over. When the door was opened, she saw Chen's good-looking face. Huan immediately hugged her arm and said, "So you didn't leave?" Chen was amused and pinched her face. "If I leave, someone will probably drag me out of the operating room to cook a meal for some girl, even if they chase me to the hospital." Huan's face suddenly turned red. She bit her lip for a long time before she said, "It's not like I have to eat it." Chen just smiled. It was a meaningful smile, and he looked at his brother again. Mo, on the other hand, was very calm. "I'm going to the study." Chen snorted and grabbed Huan. "Come and watch me cook." Huan followed him in a daze. Later, in the kitchen, Huan exclaimed from time to time, "Wow, wow, wow." Mo walked out of the study and looked impatient. "The kitchen is not a circus. Chen, you can cook." "You don't need to." Before he finished speaking, Mo's eyes also widened. Chen smiled indifferently. "I'm cooking imperial dishes from the Qing dynasty today." Mo, you probably don't like these fancy things." Mo looked over there for a long time before he coughed lightly. "Sometimes I can make do with it." Chen smiled and didn't say anything else. The knife she used was specially made. The slices she cut were as thin as snowflakes, and the fruit carvings were as exquisite as works of art. Huan was still making silly sounds, and Mo was too lazy to correct her. Chapter 4682. By the time Chen was done cooking, it was already an hour later. There were 4 dishes and 2 sets of imperial pastries, which could not be found outside. Chen could not make it in time as she had surgery. When they left, Huan was a little reluctant. Indeed, he was handsome, gentle, and could cook. He was the upgraded version of Mo. Huan felt it was a pity that Chen was a woman. She did not know that she was sighing. Mo's voice sounded dangerously. "If Chen was a man, what would you do?" Huan was shocked. She turned to look at Mo and stammered, "I don't want anything." Then she added, "What can I do?" Mo covered her mouth with his and glanced at her. "Don't even think about it." "I know. It's a sin to think about it." Huan bit her lips and snorted. Mo was a little unhappy at first, but now he laughed softly and reached out to pinch her little face. "You dare talk back?" "How would I dare?" Huan was still gloomy. After a while, she looked at Mo and thought of something. "If she doesn't eat in the morning, will she starve to death?" "It's okay even if she doesn't eat for 2 days." Mo teased her. Huan glanced at him. "Is she a camel?" Mo thought for a while and replied seriously, "She might not have a camel, so Huan, you might have such a function." Huan stared at him and only realized what he was talking about after a minute. She glared at him and blushed. After that, she was not very willing to talk to him and just ate gloomily. Mo smiled. After a while, he teased her again. "Where's the present you bought for me yesterday?" Huan made an ah sound and remembered. She pouted and said, "I met my mother." She always sounded a little delicate when she spoke. Qin Mo's heart softened. He looked at her and asked her in a low voice, "Then tell me, if I don't go, will you go home with your mother? Or will you insist on being with me?" Ayaya, they were obviously an old couple, but talking about this now felt like it was like talking about their first love. Qin Mo had an indescribable feeling in his heart. Yihuan let out an ah and lowered her head. After a while, she seemed to remember something. "You're here." He didn't say much, just 4 words. "You're here." Qin Mo reached out and gently caressed her face before saying hoarsely, "Silly. I'm not stupid." Yihuan whispered. Qin Mo smiled. "Why did you come back with me if you weren't stupid?" Yihuan did not say anything, but there was a touch of moisture in her eyes. Qin Mo knew that he had gone overboard with his joke. He pinched her face gently. "I'll take you shopping later." Yihuan was a little worried. "Weren't you feeling unwell last night?" He smiled and said gently, "I'm much better now." Yihuan made an O sound and ate her food gloomily. Qin Mo knew her temper. She must be angry. So, he reached out and held her hand gently. He said softly, "I won't do it again." She didn't say anything. She was still a little dejected. In fact, he understood that she couldn't let go of him. She had Rongyu in her heart, but living with him was a kind of compromise. She probably couldn't accept herself in this way. Qin Mo felt a little heartache and held her hand. His voice was a little hoarse. "We are husband and wife. Even if your memory is only 18 years old, your body is already 33 years old. We have been husband and wife for many years. You belong to me, not Rongyu." Chapter 4683. Qin Mo's heart ached a little. He held her hand and said in a hoarse voice, "We are husband and wife. Even if your memory is only 18 years old, your body is already 33 years old. We have been husband and wife for many years. You belong to me. You have never belonged to Rongyu." For some reason, Yihuan's heart suddenly relaxed when he said that. She felt indescribably relaxed. Perhaps she was afraid that something would happen between her and Rongyu later. She replied obediently and then finished the rest of the dishes. Her little belly was round from eating. Therefore, Qin Mo often called his sister over to cook for him. Qin complained a lot. She was the world's top chief surgeon for surgery that cost tens of millions or even hundreds of millions. Her second brother asked her to cut vegetables, but Lan Yu only ate a few times. However, Qin Mo had a way to get her to come over. Cooking every now and then was something that happened later. At this moment, Yihuan's stomach was full and she didn't want to move. In the end, she still took a good afternoon nap with Qin Mo. When she woke up, Qin Mo was still there. He was leaning against the headboard and playing with his phone. He seemed to be sending messages to the company's executives. Yihuan woke up and felt lazy all over. She didn't want to move at all. Therefore, she still lay in his arms and said softly, "Qin Mo, if you are busy, don't go out. It's just a routine. Secretary He's arrangements are the same. I was just waiting for you to wake up." He said softly and then kissed her. He got up and put on a sweater and coat for her. He did the same for himself, took his wallet and walked out. Yihuan followed beside him and said softly, "I didn't bring any money or card." Qin Mo pressed the elevator button and then looked at her. "Come out with me. You don't need to bring your card." Yihuan nodded. Thinking about it, it made sense. Her money was also his money. There was no difference. When the elevator reached the first floor, Qin Mo took her to a car. Yihuan looked at him and then at the car, feeling that something was different. Only later did she realize that he seemed to be particularly dazzling today. Usually he was already very good-looking, but today he seemed to be more particular. Well, if he had to describe it, he seemed to be a little better looking than Qin. Yihuan stared at him without blinking. Qin Mo smiled. "What's wrong?" Yihuan said softly. "You're a little different today." Qin Mo smiled and pinched her cheek. "It's good that you like it." Yihuan replied in a low voice. "I didn't say I liked it." His gaze was a little deep. "If you don't like it, why are you staring at it in a daze? You're even drooling." Yihuan subconsciously reached out to touch her lips, only to realize that she had been tricked. She glared at Qin Mo. Qin Mo laughed. I said you're silly. Hee-Hwan snorted and glared at him. Chin and Mo smiled and opened the car door for her. Hee-Hwan got in the car and turned to look at him. Chin and Mo, where are we going? We're going to buy a gift first, then we'll have dinner together to celebrate Twin breaking 2 billion. Chin and Mo said with a smile as he fastened his seatbelt. Hee-Hwan was stunned. 2 billion? Really? I still can't believe it. It's 2019, director he. Chin and Mo looked at her sideways. It would be better if you were willing to direct commercial films. Actually, you have a talent. Chapter 4684. 2019, director he. Chin and Mo turned his head and looked at her. It would be better if you were willing to direct commercial films. Actually, you have the talent. Hee-Hwan was still in disbelief. After a long time, she said softly, but I don't remember it at all. I'll teach you, Chin and Mo said straightforwardly. Hee-Hwan bit her lip. Really? But you're usually so busy with work. Chin and Mo smiled. Time could be squeezed out. With that said, he ruffled her hair again and started the car. After driving for a while, he suddenly said, Fasten your seatbelt, idiot. Hee-Hwan nodded and quietly fastened her seatbelt. Then, she looked very obedient. Chin and Mo was driving. He was very focused on the car, but he smiled slightly. After that, Hee-Hwan didn't say much. She looked out the window, and after a while, she turned to look at Chin and Mo. Chin and Mo, what kind of gift do you want? Chin and Mo was wearing a white shirt and a thin sweater. His slender fingers were holding the steering wheel, and he looked very pleasing to the eye. Hee-Hwan was a little dazed. Just as she was in a daze, Chin and Mo said, What I want, you might not be willing to give it to me. With that said, he turned his head and looked at her. Hee-Hwan's face immediately heated up, so much so that it was burning hot. She was already 18 years old mentally. How could she not understand what he was saying? But she pretended not to understand, even if she did. Hee-Hwan's face turned red again and again. In the end, she could only turn her little face to the other side. Chin and Mo smiled and didn't force her. He just reached out and held her hand while driving. His voice was low and husky, which was unique to men of his age. When the time comes, just let me know, he said with a smile. Then, he let go of her hand. Hee-Hwan bit her lip. She held her hand gently and felt a wave of heat in her palm. It was the temperature of Chin Mo's palm. It was clearly only warm, but at that moment, Hee-Hwan felt an indescribable heat. She stole a glance at him and immediately averted her face. Chin and Mo was driving. He noticed his little wife's behavior from the corner of his eye. He just felt that it was interesting and cute. After a while, his voice was elegant. Have you thought it through? What? Hee-Hwan's voice was slightly hoarse from her nervousness. She turned her head and stared at him, completely, like a helpless little rabbit. Chin and Mo smiled. Birthday present. What else do you think I'm talking about? There was a faint smile in his voice, as well as a hint of mockery. Hee-Hwan was a little annoyed, but she was more annoyed because she was at a loss for what to do. She seemed to be under his control. Therefore, she did not answer his question for a long time. She did not know how to answer him. She could only sulk, but she was also very cute when she sulked. As Chin and Mo watched, he felt a little nostalgic. He said in a low voice, Actually, it can be considered as compensation from the heavens. He finally understood that Hee-Hwan's memory loss wasn't a loss. It was compensation. It was to make up for what was missing in his heart, for them to really start afresh. He was the only one who remembered the unpleasant past, and her memories were all good things. The good things that belonged to him, Chin and Mo alone. Chin and Mo smiled and slowly drove the car into the parking lot. They didn't get out of the car immediately. Instead, they stayed in the car for about half an hour. Well, this half an hour was spent kissing. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.